There is an old saw that says that amateurs study tactics whilst professionals study logistics. But if North America was going to become the production powerhouse of World War II, this wasn't just a saying. The vessel designed to do this shipping was the Liberty ship. Jeremiah O'Brien is one of 3 survivors left afloat. Her voyages have taken her from the beaches of Normandy to the shores of Okinawa. But they're not done yet. O'Brien is still an active ship sailing from this pier in San Francisco.
Jeremiah O'Brien was a pirate. Well, technically. Jeremiah O'Brien was the first American to capture a British warship during the American Revolution. He was sailing under letters of marque from the government of Massachusetts at the time. So both the Merchant Marine and the United States Navy claim O'Brien as their own, and there have been 5 warships named after O'Brien.
In 1940, to make up for combat losses, the British government ordered the construction of 60 Ocean-class steamers in the United States. They attracted the attention of the United States Maritime Commission, which was engaged in designing merchant ships for use as transport during wartime. They required a ship with suitable cargo capacity that could be built quickly, cheaply, and in large quantities. Britain's Ocean class were suitable candidates, and after the project had been somewhat adjusted, more than 100 such ships were ordered from American shipyards at once in early 1941. On September 27 of the same year, US President Franklin Roosevelt, who was present at the launch of one of the first transports in Baltimore, made a speech and stated that they would bring freedom to Europe. Thus, this mobilization ship class received the name Liberty right away.
The man most responsible for developing and implementing the technology used to build these Liberty ships was Henry Kaiser, first in his own shipyards, but then subsequently the technique was adopted by all the other shipyards building these vessels. In this, the ship wasn't so much built as it was assembled out of components and modules manufactured elsewhere in the yard and then delivered to the slip.
Henry Kaiser had yards in California, and he developed a system of modularization. So he came up with the concept of building prefabbed pieces of equipment around the United States, shipping them to a yard, and then assembling the ships, kind of like a giant erector set or Lego set. And wartime administration saw this, sent it to all the yards, and all the yards began building ships in this method.
The scale of the construction of the Liberty ships was stunning. The entire country was fully engaged in the works on the project. To create a Liberty fleet, as the press dubbed this mobilization program, 18 shipyards were built on the Atlantic and Pacific coasts of the United States in the shortest possible time. Hundreds of related industries were engaged in manufacturing ship structure and equipment parts. The construction pace was impressive as well. The launch of Patrick Henry, attended by President Roosevelt in September 1941, took place 5 months after she had been laid down. A year later, in California, Robert E. Peary was launched 4 days, 15 hours, and 29 minutes after the keel had been laid down. This was an advertising record to some extent, of course. The average construction time of the Liberty-class ships had decreased to just 39 days by 1943 against 230 in 1941. Technical specifications of Liberty-class transport vessel Jeremiah O'Brien. Length 134.5 meters, beam 17 meters, draft 8.5 meters, displacement 14,450 tons, cargo capacity 10,200 tons, armament 76mm Mark 22 gun, one 27mm Mark 12 gun, 8 20mm Oerlikon anti-aircraft autocannons, propulsion plant, 2 Babcock & Wilcox boilers, 2,500 horsepower oil-fired triple expansion steam engine. Speed 11 knots. Cruising range 20,000 miles. Crew 81 people, 45 sailors and 36 gunners.
Liberty ship configuration was pretty typical for a vessel of the 1930s. There were 5 holds, 3 of them were forward of the engine compartment, and 2 aft. In terms of the numbers, a single Liberty ship was rated to carry 260 medium tanks, 2,840 jeeps, 651,000 rounds of 75mm ammunition, or about 18,500 cubic yards of cargo. Indeed, even today in the shipping business, a Liberty-sized cargo is still used to refer to something of about 10,000 tons.
Liberty was a twin-deck ship. The cargo hold compartments were divided into upper and lower halves by the deck. The upper deck was designed to be as free of mechanisms as possible, so that cargo could be loaded on it. A total of 12 derricks were installed on 3 masts. 1 30-ton, 1 15-ton, and 10 5-ton ones. The boiler and engine rooms were in the central part of the ship. A superstructure with living accommodation for the crew was above them, with a navigation room on top of it.
During World War II, you had 3 people down here. 1 engineer, whether it be the first, second, third, or chief, 1 fireman water tender running the boilers, and then 1 oiler making their rounds with the main engine, all the auxiliaries every half an hour. It was kept simple. A lot of us hands-on. You'd have farm boys from Kansas, Nebraska. Some of them were the best because they're used to working with tractors, and even back in those days, some of the tractors and farm machinery were still powered by steam. So they'd still be acquainted, with how it worked and how to fix it if something went wrong with it. Most people, they see this and they're just amazed that something this old is still in operation. And the fact that there's nothing automated. Probably frequently asked questions I get was, what kind of controls are you guys using? One guy even said, there are 2 stationary engineers here from New York City. What kind of controls are you guys using? Are you guys using all Honeywell? It's like, no, it's like, these are the controls right here, my 2 hand.
The triple expansion steam engine was already pretty much obsolescent at the time it was chosen, but its use was mandated by the fact that turbine manufacturing capacity was already taken up by the long-range shipbuilding program and the US Navy. Over a dozen different manufacturers created the power plants, but standardization meant that you could take components from one and interchange them with another. The open engine design certainly allowed for excellent ease of access for maintenance. The crankshaft is connected down shaft alley under the numbers 4 and 5 holds to the screw at the rear, and at 72 revolutions per minute, this will get the ship along at about 11 knots, which is pretty much typical for a cargo ship of the era.
The Liberty project was very versatile. In late 1942, a tanker project was developed on its basis. The ship's silhouette and dimensions remained the same, but instead of 5 compartments, the tanker's cargo hold was divided into 18 tanks to transport liquid fuel. 10 were in the bow and 8 in the stern. The bow tanks could transport both crude oil and gasoline. The stern ones, only oil. False hatch covers and cargo booms were installed on the deck so that submarine commanders couldn't distinguish the tanker from a convoy ship. Unlike the tanker, a variant that carried coal was made to look completely different from her ancestor. The superstructure and engine room were moved to the aft, and only a small superstructure with a wheelhouse was left in the center. The ship, however, was assembled from the same constituent parts as the original. The engine and boilers were simply moved to the aft hold, and the former engine room became another hold. Strangely enough, the Liberty Collier was considered to be the ship that was at greatest risk from a torpedo attack among the Liberty trio. The tanker had many separate compartments and was almost impossible to sink. When loaded with crude oil, it was also almost impossible to set her on fire. The collier, loaded with heavy bulk cargo, would lose buoyancy rapidly when breached and sink in a matter of minutes.
On October 27, 1941, Navy Day, President Roosevelt announced on the radio, "Our American merchant ships must be armed to defend themselves against the rattlesnakes of the sea. Our American merchant ships must be free to carry American goods into the harbors of our friends. Our American merchant ships must be protected by our American Navy." On 14th of November, the President signed an amendment to the Neutrality Act. American merchantmen would now be armed and they would enter the war zone.
Hackett's my name, James Hackett. I'm from Colorado, but I'm going to sea. That doesn't sound funny to you.
Not at all, Mr. Hackett. They haven't any ocean in Colorado, but that isn't important. You ought to make a first-class seaman. Put your mind to it.
Thank you, sir.
Report in the doctor, Mr. Hackett.
Yes, sir. Aye, sir.
Your name?
The crews of the Liberty ships were a very eclectic bunch of people. They came from all walks of life, from all over the United States. When states of emergency happen in wars like this, people come from all over. There were fishermen that wound up on these ships. There were farm boys from the Midwest that wound up on these ships running the engines. But it was people from all walks of life, all types of backgrounds, stories, educations, socioeconomic locations.
You fellas lining up for the doctor?
That's right, Bud. Pull off your shirt and make yourself comfortable.
The main law of military production, simple, cheap, and prolific, implied no exceptions for Liberty as well. For example, she had no wooden decking, even in her living compartments. It was replaced with linoleum or non-slip fireproof mastic, which was cheaper and provided higher fire resistance, a crucial feature in war conditions.
My name is Angelo DiMattei. When I was on a Liberty ship, I was chief radio operator. It took 5 months of training to be able to learn the Morse code, send the code, learn the equipment, learn how to operate it, and take care of it. Last message I sent was June of 1946, but I still remember it. Liberty.
The Jeremiah O'Brien was built in South Portland, Maine in 1943. She was assembled in 56 days. She spent most of the war in the Atlantic Theater of Operations. She did 5 transatlantic crossings. And during her time in the Atlantic, she also did shuttle missions back and forth between the beaches of Normandy. She was part of the Normandy Armada. She did 11 shuttle missions back and forth between Omaha and Utah Beach and the United Kingdom. In those 11 shuttle missions, she transported just over 1,500 vehicles of different types, just under 5,000 troops. She carried them on her deck. She was not capable of carrying them for long periods of time. And they also carried about 100,000 tons worth of ordnance and then lots and lots of other stores and equipment.
Having returned from the European theatre, Jeremiah O'Brien voyaged to Peru in the fall of 1944. After that, she returned to the United States in January 1945 and took a cargo of ammunition to the Admiralty Islands near New Guinea. Transport ship Jeremiah O'Brien and her crew then served in the Pacific Ocean until the end of the war.
San Francisco to Eniwetok individually. That was 2 weeks. Eniwetok to Ulithi, 4 days by ourselves. Ulithi to Okinawa in a convoy of 31 ships and 6 Navy escorts, normally by flags, semaphore. And we also would do zigzag patterns. We would zig for so many minutes in one direction, and then flags were dropped from the convoy commander at the front. You would zag in the other direction for maybe 20 minutes or something, and you did that wherever we were in what they felt were dangerous areas. And I do remember leaving Ulithi, and we were zigzagging, and I can remember a destroyer coming through the convoy, flipping depth charges, because I assume that they thought there was a submarine there. I don't know if anything ever happened, but we just kept on going.
As a ship with a tween deck, Liberties could be configured to carry personnel. Now, originally it was just transporting prisoners from North Africa to the US, but eventually the Army started to use them to transport troops. According to the Army, if you stacked the racks 3 high, you could fit about 300 people aboard. Stack them 5 high and the number comes closer to 550. However, what the Army said and what actually happened were not necessarily the same thing. The guys who invaded New Guinea could be found almost 900 to a single ship.
Liberty-class transports were the main ships to carry Lend-Lease cargoes. They also transported troops, military hardware, and equipment to areas of hostilities. These ships became the backbone of the entire transport fleet, ensuring that cargo flowed among the countries of the anti-Hitler coalition during World War II. At first, the press and the public were very skeptical about the Liberty ships, calling them ugly ducklings for their unsightly appearance. Later, however, their attitude toward them completely changed. The Liberty ships earned respect mostly for their simple design, which allowed for building a huge fleet of transport ships in an extremely short time. An interesting and highly indicative fact: being priced at $2 million, Liberty ships often transported cargo that significantly exceeded their value on a single voyage, thereby recovering their construction costs many-fold. For example, one such haul of cargo was 260 M4 Sherman medium tanks with a total cost of about $12 million.
2,710 Liberty ships were constructed, and they transported some 2/3 of the entire cargo traffic used by the US military and the Allies. Although a large number did survive attack from submarine and aircraft, still over 300 were lost to enemy action. In 1944, the Gallant Ship Citation was created to recognize ships and crews that demonstrated extreme valor in military operations. Only 8 Liberty ships received this award.
Among them was Stephen Hopkins, and this is her story. On a foggy morning on September 27, 1942, 2 unidentified ships were spotted from Stephen Hopkins's bridge. Their nationality and intentions of the ships soon became quite clear. They were German auxiliary cruiser Stier and supply ship Tonnenfels. Stephen Hopkins's captain gave an order to keep the ship's stern facing the enemy to reduce the ship outline for the German gunners. Another reason for this was that the only means of self-defense of the transport was mounted on the stern, a 102mm gun, which opened fire in return at 0900. Given their speed advantage, Stier and Tonnenfels were rapidly closing in on Stephen Hopkins. The first German shells hit the superstructure and inflicted shrapnel wounds to the 102mm gun crew who were running to their battle stations. A few minutes later, a shell from the American 4-inch gun damaged Stier's steering gear. A second shell hit the engine room. Drifting at a distance of just under a kilometer, the opponents were furiously shelling each other. The transport was forced to slow down to 1 knot due to the damage she had taken and numerous fires that were raging, and the explosion of another German shell killed her gun crew. Stephen Hopkins stood immobilized, suffering from fire. Her gun was silent. But then, to the surprise of the Germans, the 4-inch gun from Stephen Hopkins suddenly roared once more. 18-year-old cadet Edwin O'Hara had got to the gun and continued the battle alone. The available ammunition allowed for only 4 more shots at Steyr. Stephen Hopkins had sunk by 10 a.m. 2 hours later, the German raider followed her. Steyr's commander, Horst Gerlach, would later report that he had fought against a well-armed raider, equipped with at least 5 large guns.
Oftentimes, if you came off watch in the middle of the night, you would go into your cabin and you would take off your boots, you'd put your clothes on, you'd put your emergency suit on, have your life jacket as your pillow, and you would take your boots off, tie them in, you tie the laces together and put them around your neck. Because if the ship got torpedoed in the middle of the night, you needed to get to your lifeboat station. So life was very tense, it was stressful. There are instances on records of guys joining the Merchant Marine, and the minute they hit a port, they leave the Merchant Marine and sign up for the Army because it was safer.
The Liberty ships were slow, which made it almost impossible for them to escape from German submarines. After an increase in the production of marine turbines in late 1943 and early 1944, the United States started building faster transport ships of the Victory class in place of the Liberty class. The last Liberty class vessel was commissioned on October 30, 1945. After the war, the Liberty and Victory ships became the foundation for the reviving global maritime trade.
Greece operated many Liberty ships as cargo ships after the war. In fact, that is where Onassis made all of his money using Liberty ships. The O'Brien, her future looked very bleak. She came back to the United States with many of her sisters. She came to San Francisco. She was sent up to the reserve fleet in Sassoon Bay, and she sat there for years and years and years until she was the only Liberty ship left up in Sassoon Bay. During the 1970s, a gentleman by the name of Tom Patterson, who was an admiral in the United States Maritime Association, had served on Liberty ships during the war. And he was in charge of inspecting all the ships up in Sassoon Bay. Admiral Patterson thought it would be a travesty to lose a Liberty ship. He thought it would be a travesty that you would have to go to a library or to a museum just to see a photo of a Liberty ship. So Admiral Patterson created the National Liberty Ship Memorial in the late 70s and saved the ship. The ship's status is we're still a fully operational ship. We do regular cruises on San Francisco Bay. We sail anywhere from 3 to 5 times a year. And our future is looking well. We just came out of dry dock in 2017. And it was a very successful dry dock. The Coast Guard and the American Bureau of Shipping were very happy with the state of the ship. So our future looks bright. We will sail the O'Brien and run the O'Brien as long as we can.